You keep too many secrets, Sofia. And you keep too close for a neighbor. The first thing I carried into the new apartment was a plant I'd kept alive through 3 breakups and a global pandemic. It looked ridiculous against glossy black marble floors and a wall of glass that threw the city into my living room, highways like veins, windows like constellations. The place smelled like fresh paint and expensive air conditioning. It was the kind of apartment you rent when you're 32 and trying to convince yourself you've turned a page, even if the old chapter keeps bleeding through. I set the plant on the kitchen island, which gleamed like a surgical instrument, and told it, "We're not dying here." The plant offered no argument. Boxes followed. Architect's tubes, a lopsided lamp, my sketchbooks tied with a ribbon that had seen nicer desks. I'd packed my life in crisp white tape, like it was a gift I wasn't sure I deserved. The movers left in a rush of apologies and scuffed dolly wheels. The door clicked shut, and the silence fell the way snow does, soft, total, the kind that adds inches without you noticing. Silence used to be safety. Then it became the voice I couldn't reason with. Marcus had taught me that. How quiet could punish better than shouting, how a still face in a still room could make a woman confess crimes she didn't commit. I pressed my palms to the cold stone and inhaled. New life, new city, new ceiling height, same spine. Okay, I told the apartment. We're doing this. The apartment, like most minimalists, was withholding. I wandered to the window. From the 31st floor, the city looked like an architectural model, lines and blocks, logic and intention. That's the thing about cities. They pretend chaos is a design choice. I pressed my forehead to the glass and closed my eyes. The tension in my jaw gave an inch. The present made a small, hopeful sound. I spent an hour arranging rituals, a mug on a hook, a towel on the oven rail, a candle that said sea salt and driftwood, which was really money and trying. Shoes off by the door. Phone face down. I unlocked a box labeled fragile and found a note I'd left myself months ago, when the plan was just a wish I could barely say out loud. Future me, it read. We're braver than we think. I put the note on the fridge with a magnet shaped like a tiny house. Then I laughed. Because of course. The hallway outside my unit was a study in restraint. Matte black doors, recessed lights, a runner that swallowed footsteps. When I stepped out with a bundle of flattened cardboard to find the trash chute, the corridor breathed cold against my skin. That's when I felt it. The sensation of being watched the way a painting watches. The way a room watches when everyone you love has left it. He was there when I turned, impossibly close, as if he'd been leaning against my doorframe and I'd just missed him. Tall. Dark hair that looked soft in a way I wasn't prepared for. Eyes the color of storm water, gray, not dull but layered, shifting as if every cloud in them had somewhere to be. His clothes were dark, too. The palette of someone who didn't want to be a memory. You keep too many secrets, Sofia, he said. My throat tightened. Then my sarcasm threw me a life preserver. And you keep too close for a neighbor. His mouth ticked like I'd told a private joke. Elevators at the end, he said. But he didn't look at the elevator. He looked at me the way an engineer looks at a bridge, curious, measuring the stress points. Welcome. Thanks. I shifted the cardboard, which squeaked an opinion. How did you... My name... I listen. He nodded at the brass plate by my door, Sofia Lee. Right. The concierge had installed them 5 minutes after I signed my blood on the lease. Of course, I said lightly. Reading. Revolutionary skill. He didn't leave. He didn't exactly stay. He occupied the air the way a violin note does, present even after the bow lifts. The silence around him wasn't empty. It felt charged, like a room right before a secret is told. I slid past, because my body still believes in forward motion. He moved when I moved, not blocking, just near, as if proximity were a courtesy he could offer or rescind. The runner swallowed our footsteps. The elevator, when it arrived, made no sound at all. The doors parted like a thought finishing itself. We rode down together with the cardboard and the plant's shadow and the reflected city moving in the brushed steel panels. He didn't press a button. The elevator simply knew, which was cute in the way of expensive buildings that want to love you with automation. I stole a look at his profile, the clean line of cheekbone, the calm in it. Most faces are a map to a person's weather. His was an interior courtyard, spare, private, lush if you were invited in. You live on this floor? I asked, because I'm brave in elevators. He didn't look at me. For now? Short lease? Something like that. I nodded like that meant something, which it didn't. I'm an architect, I offered, because strangers in elevators love context. I just moved out of some things, into others. Congratulations. He made the word sound like an observation rather than a wish. The doors opened on a lobby that gleamed, a forest of chrome and orchids arranged with military tenderness. I dumped the cardboard into the service room, finding the chute disguised as a handsome cabinet. When I came out, he was waiting where I'd left him, hands in pockets like patience was easy. You didn't have to wait, I said. I know, he said. Every cell in my body rolled its eyes. Perfect. A handsome man who speaks in koans. A neighbor who reads door plates and my nervous system. Definitely not a red flag stitched into a velvet suit. Back upstairs, my apartment had shifted in that subtle way empty rooms do when you've been briefly inhabited by another presence. The plant looked pleased with its corner. The candle fought a losing battle with the AC. I unpacked a stack of sample books and spread them like tarot, concrete, oak veneers, textiles that whispered wealth. Starting a new project in an old heart required materials that could take a hit. I didn't hear him come to my door. I only felt the pressure change, as if the hallway drew a breath and held it. When I opened, he stood there, exactly far enough that I could claim I wasn't startled. I forgot to introduce myself, he said. Kael. Like Kael, the green? The joke escaped before I could stop it. Humor, my last functioning organ. Spelled differently. His eyes didn't laugh, but they warmed a fraction, like a dimmer slid up. Sofia, I said, and immediately wanted the syllables back. He already knew. I already knew he knew. But introductions are rituals we perform so we don't have to hand each other our throats. Good night, Sofia, he said, and it was an instruction more than a wish. Good night, Kael. I leaned against the door after it clicked shut and pretended I was listening to the apartment settle. What I was actually listening to was the echo of my name in his voice, which had a weight to it, like it was meant to keep things from floating away. I washed a glass I didn't dirty. I wiped the already clean counter. I checked the locks twice, then laughed at myself and checked them a third time because anxiety isn't a democracy. Outside, the city hummed, a distant sea. In here, the silence pressed its cool palm to my forehead. When sleep didn't come, I sketched at the island, lines becoming elevations, elevations becoming a shape. I recognized a building that looks like strength from the street and feels like a cage from the inside. The same way I'd felt for the last year. The same way I refuse to feel now. You're not a cage, I told the apartment. You're a hinge. That's when the lights in the hallway flickered, not off, just the faintest tremor, as if the building shivered. I looked up. A shadow crossed under my door. A pause, a tilt, listening. He didn't knock. He didn't move on right away either. My heartbeat counted his patience. I stood there, one hand on the wood, and thought the thing I had not allowed all day. I am tired of carrying everything alone. The shadow lingered a second longer and then dissolved into the long carpeted quiet. I opened the door on nothing. The hallway offered me its immaculate face. I stepped out, barefoot, and felt the runner swallow the small sound of me. No music, no voices. Somewhere far below, the city turned its neon coins. I went back inside and shut the door. The room exhaled. I exhaled with it. When I finally crawled into bed, the linen felt like cool paper. I closed my eyes and there he was again, the shape of him at my threshold, not menace, not safety, a listening. And for one bright, alarming second, it felt like the thought I hadn't set out. Loud answered from the other side, calm as a hand on my back. You don't have to. The lobby of the building was designed to impress. Towering glass, curated orchids. In white pots, furniture so angular it looked like it resented being sat on. It was the kind of space where silence was an accessory. Everyone who passed through seemed airbrushed, executives with sharp suits, women with handbags that cost more than my rent, the occasional child dressed like a runway extra. I told myself I needed to blend. I was here to start over, not to become the subject of whispered committee meetings, about the architect who looks like she brought her trauma in cardboard boxes. So I smiled, lifted my chin, and pretended I hadn't Googled how to make friends in your 30s. That's when she arrived, Lila. She was beautiful in the way magazines try to convince you beauty is easy, smooth hair, perfect manicure, and an outfit that managed to say effortless while actually being an itemized budget of someone's vacation fund. She carried a cup of coffee like it was a business card. "You must be new." Her smile was warm, but her eyes did the quick sweep women do when they're measuring value: shoes, posture, jewelry, confidence. I was a puzzle piece she'd already decided didn't fit. "Sofia," I said, holding out my hand. "Lila." She clasped my fingers briefly, her skin cool, her nails painted a glossy, hostile red. "I live down the hall. Unit 3103. You're 3107, right?" I blinked. "That's fast." She tapped the side of her temple. "Word travels." The way she said it made me feel like the walls of this place had ears. Maybe they did. We ended up at the Courtyard Cafe because she insisted I needed to know the best cappuccino in a 3-block radius. I ordered a latte. She ordered nothing but managed to sip mine when it arrived, tilting the cup to her lips like we'd known each other for years. "So," she leaned forward, elbow on the marble table. "You're an architect." "Yes." "Independent?" "For now." She smiled again, sharp this time. "And recently single." "That must be refreshing." It wasn't a question. My throat tightened, but my voice came out steady. "That's one word for it." She tilted her head, hair swinging like it had a choreography. "People say you left a fiancé? Or a husband? I forget which." I froze. I hadn't told anyone in this building. I hadn't told anyone in this city, actually. But Lila's voice made it sound like my personal life was already circulating on a neighborhood group chat. "It doesn't matter," I said flatly. "Of course." She waved a hand as if brushing off lint. "We've all had our little escapes. Anyway, don't worry. People get bored of gossip quickly." She took another sip of my coffee. "Usually," I thought about hurling the cup at her perfect hair, but architects are trained to be diplomatic in front of disaster. Instead, I smiled thinly. The elevator ride back up should have been uneventful. But he was there. Kael, standing already inside when the doors opened, as if the elevator was his private office and I was interrupting a meeting. His hands were in his pockets, his posture relaxed, but the air felt 10 degrees colder the second I stepped in. Lila prattled on beside me, but her voice thinned. She noticed him too. Hard not to. He had a presence that swallowed conversation. She glanced at him once, twice, then gave me a look I couldn't quite decode. Envy? Curiosity? Warning? When we reached her floor, she smiled too brightly and slipped out. The doors closed. Silence thickened. I pressed my floor button, though I had the feeling I didn't need to. This building seemed to move for him. "You shouldn't let her drink your coffee," he said at last. His voice was calm, low, the kind that vibrated against metal walls. I turned my head sharply. "You were listening?" "I'm always listening." It should have terrified me. Instead, it landed somewhere between alarm and a strange magnetic pull. I crossed my arms. "Let me guess. Next you'll tell me my shoe size." He didn't smile. He looked directly at me, and his eyes, storm gray again, darker this time, seemed to catch a reflection I couldn't see. "You're afraid of the dark." The words hit like a cold finger at the back of my neck. I stiffened. My mouth opened, then closed. Nobody knew that. Marcus didn't even know. I'd hidden it since childhood, sleeping with lights masked as reading lamps, avoiding blackout curtains. "How?" I started, but the elevator chimed, the doors sliding open onto my floor. He stepped aside, waiting for me to go first. I moved past him, pulse erratic, and when I reached my door, I fumbled the keys like a rookie. He didn't offer to help. He didn't move at all. He just watched, expression unreadable, until the lock clicked. "Good night, Sofia," he said softly, and the words curled down my spine. I shut the door quickly, leaned against it, and let out a shaky laugh. Perfect. Psycho neighbor, psychic neighbor, whatever he is. It figures. But when I turned off the lamp and the apartment fell into shadow, my body betrayed me with a shiver. Because for the first time in years, I wasn't sure I was afraid of the dark. I was afraid of how much I wanted him standing in it with me. The conference room at the firm had been designed to look like brilliance was inevitable. Polished glass, walls, brushed steel fixtures, and a skyline view that screamed, "Everything you make here will matter." Under that kind of pressure, it was easy to forget that buildings don't care about your ego. They just need foundations, math, and someone stubborn enough to keep drawing the lines. Today, that someone was me. My project, a mixed-use complex with a green roof and public courtyards, was sprawled. Across the digital screen, each rendering glowing with weeks of sleepless polish. I held the remote in one hand, my notes in the other, and tried to ignore how my heartbeat drowned out the hum of the projector. This design, I said, projecting confidence like a spotlight, prioritizes open-air circulation, natural light, and adaptive communal spaces. It's not just sustainable, it's livable. People won't just walk through this building. They'll belong to it. Polite nods around the table. One investor tilted his head, skeptical. My boss cleared his throat in that neutral way that meant, don't blow it. And then, of course, Daniel spoke. Daniel with the perfect tie knot, and the kind of smirk that always bordered on flattery or insult, depending on the angle. He leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand as if he were my biggest fan. Brilliant work, Sofia, he said, too smoothly. Truly. You always manage to make concrete feel emotional. The room chuckled. Compliment? Insult? Both. His tone suggested he was applauding me, but his eyes, green, sharp, calculating, were measuring how much of my thunder he could pocket for himself. Thank you, I said evenly, though my grip on the remote tightened. The presentation wrapped with the usual exchange of cards, promises of follow-up, meetings, the subtle shifting of priorities I'd grown used to in this business. By the time I returned to my desk, my jaw ached from clenching it, and then my phone buzzed. The name on the screen was one I hadn't seen in months, but one my body recognized instantly, Marcus. I froze. For a second, I thought maybe my imagination had conjured him, like ghosts do when you're too tired to argue. But the text was real. Sofia, heard about your project. Let me help. I can buy it out, bring you under my company's wing. You know I'll take care of you. I read it twice, 3 times. Every word was a scalpel, cutting into the scar I'd been so careful to hide. Help. Buy. Take care of you. Always verbs that meant control. A memory hit hard. Marcus standing over me in our old kitchen, tie loosened, glass of scotch in hand. Why are you stressing over this? Let me call them. Let me decide. You'll thank me later. And me, younger, dumber, thinking maybe love meant letting someone else hold the pen to your blueprint. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. The polite version of me wanted to respond, no, thank you. Best of luck. But the real version, the one I was still learning how to use, wanted to scream, you don't own me anymore. Instead, I set the phone down, face down, and pressed my palms into the desk. My reflection in the black screen of my laptop looked like someone halfway between fury and collapse. By the time evening hit, the office emptied, leaving only the glow of the city through, the windows and the quiet shuffle of janitors vacuuming up the day's debris. I gathered my drawings into a neat pile, though neatness didn't solve the knot in my chest. Back at the apartment building, I didn't even make it inside before the exhaustion caved in. I sank onto the stairwell between floors, folders still in hand, my body heavier than the concrete around me. The silence of the hall pressed in, not oppressive this time, but waiting. That's when I felt him. Kael. He appeared at the top of the stairs as if he'd been drawn by the crack in me. No footsteps, no preamble. Just there, framed by the dim overhead light, his dark hair falling slightly into his eyes. You look tired, he said, not unkindly. Just fact. I am. My voice surprised me, thin, worn, not the Sofia I pretended to be at meetings. He didn't move closer right away, but the air shifted. Something in me loosened, as if his presence gave permission. My shoulders dropped an inch. My breath came easier. It wasn't that he took the weight. It was more like he absorbed the echo of it, leaving me with only the original note. We didn't speak again until we reached my door. I unlocked it, stepped inside, and for reasons I couldn't articulate, held it open. He followed, silent, unassuming, as if the invitation had been written into the air. I filled the kettle, the ritual grounding me. He stood by the window, hands still in pockets, watching the city lights scatter across the glass. I placed 2 mugs on the counter, tea leaves unfurling in the water like ink and paper. When I handed him a cup, he accepted it with both hands, as though it mattered. We sat at the island in companionable silence. Finally, I asked, do you always wander the halls at night? He took a slow sip, eyes still on me. Only when someone's awake enough to hear me. I laughed softly, shaking my head. cryptic as always. But my laughter died when I realized he was watching me with that same intent focus, the kind Daniel used in meetings but inverted. Not greedy, not calculating, listening, not to my words, but to something beneath them. I shifted uncomfortably. You look at me like I'm speaking when I'm not. Because you are, he said simply. My chest tightened, though not in the way Marcus's silence used to choke me. This was different. Kael's quiet didn't demand. It invited. It made me feel as though for once the parts of me I never voiced weren't trapped. They were heard. I curled my hands around the warm mug. For the first time in months, the noise in my head dimmed. The exhaustion I'd carried from the office, from Marcus's text, from years of letting other people write my narrative. It all thinned, like steam dissolving into air. Sitting there, across from Kael, I felt something I hadn't allowed myself to in a long time. Relief. And the terrifying thought that followed it. Maybe he hears me more than anyone ever has. Evenings had taken on a rhythm I hadn't planned for. Work, commute, the ritual of shedding the city from my skin. Then Kael. Always Kael. Sometimes he appeared at my door before I could put the key in. Sometimes he was already waiting by the window when I turned around, as though silence itself had given him a spare set of keys. At first, I told myself it was unnerving, maybe even wrong. But the truth was simpler. I let him in. We didn't always talk. Sometimes he'd sit with a book I suspected he didn't really read. While I sketched at the island, our silences braided together. Other nights, words slipped out of me like loose threads. One night, as rain scattered against the glass, I told him about my childhood fear of storms. When I was 7, I said, tracing a raindrop down the window, there was this thunderstorm so loud I thought the world was cracking in half. I climbed into my closet and stayed there all night. My mom couldn't get me out. For years, anytime it stormed, that closet was my bunker. Kael didn't laugh. He didn't soften with pity. He just watched me the way he always did, steady, patient. And now? He asked. I don't run to closets anymore, I said. But sometimes, when the lights flicker, my body still thinks I should. He nodded like he'd known all along. And maybe he had, because the longer I sat across from him, the less alone that memory felt. And stranger still, the more secrets I confessed, the lighter my chest became. It wasn't therapy. It wasn't confession. It was something more dangerous, relief. At the office, that lightness didn't last. I reached my desk one morning to find the tube of drawings I'd left carefully stacked. Gone. My heart plummeted. I checked every shelf, every drawer. Empty. Looking for these? Daniel's voice was casual, almost cheerful. He appeared behind me with my portfolio tucked under his arm. Relief warred with suspicion. Yes. Where did you? Must have gotten mixed with mine. Honest mistake. He laid them down on my desk with exaggerated care, like he was returning a child. You know how late nights are. Lines blur. The way his eyes glinted told me he wasn't talking about blueprints. By the afternoon, my manager had called me in. Funny coincidence, he said, flipping through an email. Our competitor just pitched a project suspiciously similar to yours. Whole sections overlap. The blood drained from my face. I thought of Daniel's smug grin, the way he called my work emotional concrete, as if emotion was a weakness. Of course. He hadn't just borrowed my drawings, he'd copied them. I left the office shaking, my phone buzzing with an avalanche of missed calls. Marcus again. Lila. Unknown numbers. I shoved it into my bag and walked until my legs stopped feeling like mine. The courtyard of the building was buzzing when I returned. Residents lingered near the fountain, sipping wine, gossiping under strings of curated lights. I almost made it past them when I heard her voice. Lila. She was in her element, a glass of rose balanced perfectly between manicured fingers. And really, it's no wonder she landed that project, she was saying, her voice pitched just high enough to carry. Living next door to him? Mysterious, brooding, always hovering. She's clearly using whatever arrangement they have. The cluster of neighbors laughed, some feigning surprise, some pretending not to. My face burned hot enough to light the courtyard. I stepped forward. You must be very bored, Lila. Her smile widened. All sugar. Oh, Sofia, I was just telling everyone how lucky you are. Such supportive company right under your nose. I bit back the dozen things I wanted to say. Instead, I muttered under my breath. Perfect. Discounted demon boyfriend package. Comes with free rumors. Kael appeared then, like he always did when the air was too sharp to breathe. One look from him, and the courtyard's chatter faltered, people suddenly remembering they had somewhere else to be. Even Lila hesitated, her perfect smile flickering. Later, in my apartment, the anger melted into exhaustion. I tossed my bag down, pacing the kitchen like a caged thing. They think I'm sleeping my way into architecture now, I snapped. As if men aren't already lined up to take credit for my work. Kael leaned against the counter, arms folded. His expression didn't change, but something in the air softened. They'll forget, he said. No, they won't. People love a story more than facts. And apparently I'm the villain in theirs. I slammed a glass onto the counter harder than necessary. He caught it before it could topple, his hand brushing mine. Just that touch, light, incidental, sent a pulse through me. I froze. He didn't let go. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment the room was thick with something heavier than silence. My heart hammered. I stepped closer. So did he. It wasn't planned. It wasn't careful. It was the slow inevitability of two magnets finally admitting what they were. His breath mingled with mine, the city hum falling away. My body leaned forward, ready to close the inch between us. And then, my phone rang. The shrill sound cut through the air like a blade. I jerked back, nearly laughing at the absurdity of it. Kael released my hand slowly, deliberately. I fumbled for the phone. Marcus's name glowed on the screen. Of course. Answer, Kael said quietly, unreadable. I shook my head, pressing decline. The silence that followed was louder than any argument. When I finally dared to meet his eyes again, something lingered there. Patience, restraint, maybe even disappointment. I didn't know what scared me more, that we hadn't kissed. Or that I wanted to, so badly it felt like a secret he already knew. The elevator was supposed to be just another late-night ride up 31 floors. I'd stayed too long at the office again, trying to untangle the mess Daniel left in his wake. And by the time I got home, the building was quiet in that uncanny hotel lobby way. The doors slid shut with a whisper. I pressed my floor, exhaled. And then I realized, Kael was already there, of course. He stood in the corner, hands in his pockets, eyes half-shadowed under the dim fluorescent light. He hadn't pressed a button either. The silence between us stretched, taut as a wire. Then the elevator shuddered. Stopped. The panel lights flickered, then froze. We didn't move. Oh, perfect, I muttered, jabbing the emergency call button. Nothing. My laugh came out higher than I liked. Trapped between floors, just what I needed. Is it too much to ask for one boring Tuesday night? Kael didn't answer. Typical. He just watched me, calm, as though he'd expected this interruption. I leaned against the wall, crossing my arms. Okay, look. If you're about to tell me you planned this, don't. That would officially make you a horror movie cliché. His lips curved, barely. Not everything is planned. Great. Comforting. I tapped my foot, trying to bleed nervous energy into the carpet. The silence pressed in. Heavy. Denser than usual, as though the air itself had weight. My ears strained, but there was nothing. No hum of machinery, no distant lobby music. Just our breathing. I cracked a joke to keep the panic from winning. So, what's next? Do we sing camp songs until maintenance saves us? Kael tilted his head, gaze steady. You're afraid of being trapped. No kidding. I gestured at the walls. Tiny box suspended by cables? Pretty rational fear, don't you think? He stepped closer, not enough to crowd me, but enough that the elevator seemed smaller. His voice was low, steady. That's not the only reason. Something in my chest tightened. I wanted to argue, to tell him he didn't know me that well. But he did. Somehow, he did. Maybe I just don't like being stuck in the dark with a man who thinks silence is foreplay, I shot back, my sarcasm wobbling between shield and confession. The corner of his mouth ticked upward. Better than lies. I swallowed. My throat felt dry. You think everything I say is a lie? Not lies? His eyes met mine, sharp, unflinching. But you hide. You hide even from yourself. The words hit harder than I wanted to admit. The closet during thunderstorms. The years with Marcus, smiling while I suffocated. The way I laughed at Lila's rumors instead of admitting how much they stung. Kael stepped closer again. The air shifted with him, dense, charged. "I know too many of your secrets already," he said softly. "But I'd rather hear the ones you choose to give." I pressed back against the wall, breath uneven. My voice came out thin. "And if I don't, then you'll keep carrying them alone." He tilted his head, studying me. "But I think you're tired of that." The elevator was so quiet I could hear the brush of my pulse in my ears, the rhythm of his breathing. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was alive, vibrating between us, a tether pulling tighter. I laughed once, nervous. "You have the worst timing, you know that? Of all the places to have this conversation. Timing doesn't matter." He was closer now, close enough that I could see the subtle shift in his storm-gray eyes, the way they darkened like clouds before rain. "Only choice does." My body betrayed me before my mind caught up. I leaned toward him, just slightly, like gravity had been rewired. His hand lifted, hovering near my jaw, not touching, just waiting. The silence roared. My breath hitched. Every inch between us hummed with possibility. I whispered, "This is insane." "Yes." His voice was barely audible. "So stop." But I didn't. Neither did he. The space dissolved. His mouth brushed mine, tentative at first, like testing the shape of a word long forbidden. The kiss was quiet, no gasp, no desperate clutching, just steady pressure, the kind of connection that rewrites everything you thought you knew about closeness. My eyes fluttered shut. His hand finally touched me, fingertips ghosting against my cheek, grounding me in a way no foundation ever had. When we broke apart, it wasn't dramatic. It was soft, breath against breath. The elevator hummed suddenly, lights flickering back to life. The machinery groaned, and we began moving again. I laughed, breathless. Of course. Saved by maintenance right after the big moment. Perfect timing. Kael didn't laugh, but his gaze lingered on me, steady, unflinching, like silence itself had claimed me. When the doors opened, the world rushed back in. Light, sound, the faint smell of disinfectant. But the quiet between us followed me out, clinging like an invisible thread. And I knew, without admitting it out loud, that nothing about this silence was empty anymore. The email hit me like a wrecking ball. "Your project will no longer be considered for this round of funding. We've accepted a more competitive proposal." I read it 3 times, blinking, waiting for the words to change. They didn't. My chest constricted, air scraping thin. The kicker? Attached was a glossy presentation, my design, stripped of my name, repackaged with a rival firm's logo. My courtyards, my roofline, my hours of sketching until dawn. Daniel's smirk echoed in my skull like a door slamming. By noon, whispers slithered through the office like smoke. Daniel hadn't even bothered to hide his betrayal. He strutted between desks, offering false sympathy, the saint who'd tried to help Sofia get her work in order. And then, as if the knife needed twisting, Marcus called. "I warned you this world would eat you alive without me. I still can buy you out, Sofia. I can fix this mess. Sign with me. You'll be protected." The smugness in his voice pulled me straight back into the old kitchen. The old rules, the old silence where my words didn't matter. I hung up before he could finish. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the phone. By the time I staggered back to the apartment complex, the courtyard buzzed with its usual curated gossip. Lila's laughter rang out like champagne fizz. Heads turned as I passed, voices dropping to whispers. Every step was a spotlight, every glance a dagger. I pushed through the glass doors, into the elevator, into the only space where I could fall apart unseen. My breath came sharp, ragged. I pressed my forehead to the cool metal wall. When I opened my eyes, he was there. Kael. Of course. He stood in the hallway outside my door, still as if he'd been waiting for me all along. When our eyes met, something in me cracked. "It's gone," I whispered, fumbling with my keys. Everything I built, gone. The door shut behind us, sealing the room in its usual hush. I collapsed onto the couch, dropping my bag to the floor. My voice shook, hot with fury. Daniel stole it. Marcus bought out the investors. And everyone thinks I deserved it. That's the story they want. Sofia can't survive on her own. She never could. Silence. He didn't try to argue. He didn't tell me I was wrong. He just stood there, watching. Something inside me snapped. "Say something." I shouted. Or is this just entertainment for you? Watching me spiral, watching me drown. What is it, Kael? What the hell are you? The room stilled. The shadows thickened, pooling around him like smoke. His storm-gray eyes darkened until they were nearly black. And when he finally spoke, his voice seemed to vibrate against the walls. I am not what you think. The air shifted, heavy, charged. A faint hum pressed against my ears, as though the silence itself had weight. I'm not just your neighbor, he said. I am silence. I am what comes when the world stops speaking. I feed on secrets, on the words people bury. They come to me, whether they want to or not. My stomach dropped. I stumbled back, my laugh jagged and disbelieving. You're telling me you're, what, some kind of demon? His gaze held steady. Yes. I pressed a hand to my chest, breath shallow. Fury flared, hot and sharp. Of course. Of course, the one person I thought I could trust turns out to be this. I should have known. Too good at listening. Too good at showing up exactly when My voice broke. You've been feeding on me this whole time, haven't you? His jaw tightened. No. Don't lie to me. My hands shook as I gestured wildly. Every word I said, every secret I thought was mine. You've been eating it like a parasite. He stepped closer, slow, deliberate, not threatening, steady. I could have taken more. I didn't. I never wanted to strip you. I wanted to share. The word snagged my anger. Share? What the hell does that even mean? He crouched slightly, leveling his gaze with mine, his voice a low tether. When you spoke, when you remembered the storm, when you admitted your fear, I didn't take those things away. I gave you silence so you could let them out. I carried the echo so you wouldn't have to. That is why you felt lighter. Not because I stole from you. Because I held it with you. My throat burned. I wanted to fight him, to keep the fury alive, but the memory hit, how it had. Felt easier, how the noise in my chest had thinned each time he listened. Still, the fear clung. And what happens when you get tired of sharing, Kael? What happens when you decide you want everything? For the first time, his voice softened, almost human. Then I wouldn't be here. I would have left you hollow the first night we met. Silence fell again, but it was different now. Less oppressive, more like a held breath. I don't want to feed on you, Sofia. His words were quiet, steady, undeniable. I want to share with you. The anger inside me sagged, its edges blunted by exhaustion. Tears pricked my eyes before I could stop them. I hated that he saw, hated that he was right, hated that part of me believed him more than I wanted to. I turned away, hugging my arms around myself. You make it sound so easy. It isn't. His voice came from behind me. Close, but not suffocating. But it could be real. I closed my eyes, the weight of betrayal still raw, but under it, something else. Something terrifying in its tenderness. For once, the silence between us wasn't a cage. It was a choice. The auditorium lights dimmed, leaving the stage bathed in a clean wash of white. My palms were damp against the clicker, but my back was straight. My project, glowed across the massive screen behind me, renderings of courtyards and light-drenched atriums, the vision I'd nearly let be stolen. I drew in a breath. This is mine. No one else writes this story. Good afternoon, I began, my voice steady. What you'll see today is not just a building, it's a promise of space, one that listens to the people inside it. Slides advanced. Words flowed. I explained airflow systems, adaptable green roofs, open plazas designed to belong to everyone. Every detail was a piece of me I'd refused to give away. Halfway through, Daniel rose from his seat, fake smile plastered on. Excuse me, he interrupted smoothly. I'd just like to point out that much of this design resembles concepts I've previously contributed. Murmurs rippled across the investors. I paused, let the silence stretch, then clicked to the next slide. This, I said, zooming in on the blueprint, is my handwriting, dated 6 months ago. These are my personal sketches, pulled from the system with timestamps. And this, another slide, another receipt, is my email correspondence showing Daniel's unauthorized downloads. The room shifted instantly. Gasps. Brows raised. Eyes cutting toward him, sharp as blades. Daniel's mask cracked, a flicker of panic breaking through. And just to clarify, I added, my tone calm but steel-edged. A project isn't emotional concrete, as some might joke. It's the labor of the person who builds it. And this one belongs to me. The applause was slow at first, then swelling, echoing through the hall until the sound was undeniable. One of the lead investors stood, adjusting his cufflinks. Miss Lee, we look forward to moving forward. With you. Exclusively. Daniel sank into his chair. Pale, words abandoned him for once. At the back of the room, I caught sight of Marcus. He was leaning against the wall, arms crossed, a storm cloud wrapped in Armani. His jaw was tight, his eyes simmering. When I met his gaze, he straightened, as if about to object. But the investors moved past him, handshakes extended in my direction. Marcus's presence shrank until it was nothing more than an aftertaste I refused to swallow. By the time I returned to the apartment, adrenaline had burned off into exhaustion. I set my bag down and collapsed into a chair. The silence of the room didn't suffocate. It waited, like an open palm. The door clicked. Kael entered without knocking, as he often did. But tonight, something was different. He didn't hover in the shadows or offer cryptic observations. He simply crossed the room and placed a steaming cup of tea in front of me. "You did it," he said. I laughed, a soft, shaky sound. "I did." And Marcus? Exposed for what he is. His offers fell flat. He doesn't get to own me anymore. I exhaled, shoulders loosening. And Daniel, well, he'll have to live with the sound of that applause echoing every time he closes his eyes. Kael's lips curved into the faintest smile. Justice. Then. Not perfect, I admitted, wrapping my hands around the cup. But close enough. For a moment, we just sat there, the quiet pulsing gently between us. No secrets pulled, no words stolen, just shared stillness. Later, on the terrace, the night air was cool against my skin. The city stretched out in its endless geometry, lights flickering like a constellation built by stubborn hands. Kael leaned against the railing beside me. His presence no longer unnerved me. It steadied me. "Do you still think I should be afraid of you?" I asked, half teasing. He didn't answer right away. "I'm not harmless. But I don't want to be feared. Not by you." I studied his profile, the way the shadows curved against his jaw, the calm in his storm-gray eyes. "I don't fear you," I said softly. "Not anymore." He turned, and in his gaze was something I hadn't dared to hope for. An anchor, not a chain. "I built homes for years," I whispered, my voice catching on the truth of it, but only now I feel at home. The silence that followed was warm, shared, alive. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid to let it hold me.